Honorable Minister, Excellencies, Head of the Lewis University, my friend here, Goldstein, who's an expert on India. He's almost stole my thunder. I've seen enough of Indian statistics that he's been able to give. Students, my Indian delegation, friends from the media. It's a great opportunity for a business leader and my other team members here to interact with the generation, with the new generation that sits here, that is much more eager to understand what is happening in a country like India. I will speak something on India, India-Italian relationship, how they progressed over a period of time. We have with us our minister who's a thought leader who will probably dwell much more deeper into some of the issues that you have raised. But I can tell you the Indian economic story of the last 20 years, when India liberalized, when India opened up its shores for foreign direct investment, has always been one-way street. We've always looked ahead. We've always moved forward. The policies in a country like India, you have to understand with 1.2 billion people, the consensus has to be built. We have to make sure that the social fabric of the society that we all represent, and especially my minister who sits here and the government of India, is very, very important for us to understand how it has to go along. We must also realize, while the world speaks about opening of Indian FDIs and Indian rules, you also have to understand world at large, even today, when you look at the developed economies, they still hold back in many areas. This Indian-Italian relationship has been a relationship which has been there for centuries. The trade between the two countries has been there for long enough. Yet, we don't think so. The potential of the two countries have been well exploited. The velocity, the trajectory of this relationship still remains to be seen and still remains to be tested. Let me tell you about the Indian story. We are the product of the liberalization. Me and my company and many other colleagues of mine, we've all seen very different days. I call 1947 as our political independence and 1991 our economic independence when India really opened up. It's just been 2 decades. Country has been growing at 8 to 9%. We have seen the growth even at the bad times when the globe was melting, when the world was under severe shrinking problem, India was still growing at 6.5%, 7%. Today at $1.3 trillion economy, growing at 8 to 9%, even as you've seen the reports surpassing China growth over a period of time, clearly tells you the story that this is not a flash in the pan. India's growth story is here to stay. I have just come from Davos, so was my minister. I can tell you, not only India inclusive was everywhere, the Indian story was being looked into in very, very different way. Where is India growing? What are the areas that India needs to grow? What are the areas that India needs to invest much more, as you have raised? Economically, if you see, barring 1 or 2 sectors, India is truly open on the FDI. As far as the investments are concerned, India government today is investing hugely in 2 areas, both social infrastructure and physical infrastructure. At $1.3 trillion, growing at about 9% economy, and hopefully, if we can get our infrastructure story right, which is already happening, we will see a growth in a double digit, which means, and all the predictions tell us that by 2030, India will be one of the 3rd largest economy in the world. China, US, and India, that's the kind of role play that will happen. Now, a growth story like this, should a country like Italy not participate? Has enough participation come from this country? Answer is clearly no. If you look at the 10-year space, the investment is only about $1 billion, just short of $1 billion. And if I see the Indian investment coming in the last 5 years, it's almost half of that. You have to recognize that India growth story is now looking at getting confident, shaping up our economy in a different way, that Indian companies are going and investing worldwide. Not only in Africa, US, Europe, even in this country. So clearly the Indian companies now have the muscle, the mind, the management skill set, and business models which are quite innovative. Let me give you a story of my own company. I run a telecom company. I started my life with British Telecom, followed by Telecom Italia. And when the downturn came and Telecom Italia decided to move away from India, I flew in Rome, met the CEO and told him, this is something you will regret down the line. And he looked at me and said, Mr. Mittal, India is not priority. We have to defend our home country, we have to defend our other European investments, and so on and so forth. As they say, rest is history. India is today the fastest growing telecom, adding 15 million new customers every month. From 2 million when I came in, today at 700 million customers. The business models that India is showing, you would have never seen. At 1 cent a minute, 1 cent a minute is the cheapest mobile call you can ever make. So that clearly tells you the story that if you have the model right, if you have the innovation, if you have the price points right, India is the country to come and invest. Globally, we come across many people. I go and meet many people. I have investments across from Europe, from US. Today, if any global CEO has to go international, if India is not on a table, the board needs to ask the CEO why India's strategy is missing out of the whole thing. We are compared to our neighbors. Let me give you a point of view here. It is the Asian time. It is the Asian economies which are going to be showing this, the growth in this world. While our neighbors are growing, we are growing at the same pace. While the economies may differ, but the long-term investment in the country where you have very robust judiciary, executive, is the largest democracy, English-speaking people, and with all humility, I would say, enough intelligence in those people to create a nation of this kind. You refer to father of the nation. He has always said, and he's the one who actually started the organization that I had today in 1927. While he was a thought leader and a wise leader, he always had that business and politics need to continue. Hence, even today, when we have leadership, it makes sure that the growth is all inclusive. India's growth story is not only left to 300 to 400 million people, but it has to deep down into 1 billion people. We are investing almost 83% of our last budget has gone into social infrastructure, into physical infrastructure, education, you talked about, healthcare, sanitation, and of course connecting the entire villages, 600,000 villages that we have. Clearly there is enough work to do, but the generation that you represent is in a very sweet spot. There was nothing known as internationalization when we were growing up. Today, the world is connected as never before. People are exchanging here visiting cards. When I look at my children, the world is changing. Technology is moving so very quickly. And India is showing the world how it can intertwine itself in that economic and the technological world. We are the software giants, as we call it. We are the people who are creating technologies. We are creating technologies not only in the field that I have referred to, but in nanotechnology, agriculture, we are wanting to go in through a second green revolution in the country. So clearly, India's growth story, if you are seeing, is actually touching all pervasive growth which is happening. Not to forget, 550 million people in the age bracket of 14 to 30. Our median age today is 24 to 25. It is a young nation, old civilization, but a very young nation. And where is the consumption going to happen? Consumptions will take place in the younger nations where people do consume much more than the countries where the demographics are very different. 1 minute I will touch upon the trade issues. €5 billion trade between the two countries. Is that enough? Is that enough for us to sustain this growth momentum when India is engaging the world? Should Italy and India not be engaging much further, much deeper? The investments which are coming out of here need to get into much more into the infrastructure area, where $1.5 trillion is going to be invested in the coming 5 years. Italian companies need to come and invest in our country. As I said, it is time that this nation is looked into very differently. I have met few people in these few minutes. There are many experts here who believe in India. I hope and I wish that during this interaction and after you would have heard the minister, you will be much more convinced that it is our turn, it is India's turn. Lastly, tourism. I have one of my colleagues here who heads our tourism. Why should a country like India not have much more tourism coming out of India? Bollywood, which is my Indian cinema story, which makes the most movies probably across the world, and the only one sweet spot they have is Switzerland. Why should Italy be not this for them? I understand there are areas that we have to discuss in terms of visas and other issues. that also needs to be discussed. But as head of the chamber, let me invite you, the business people here, through you and the students here. I was telling Dean that I get at least 8 to 10 universities from US and UK every year, 45 to 50 students who visit India for 2 to 3 weeks, because India's cannot be actually understood in 2 to 3 weeks, but it gives you the insights to it. So I would invite, sir, that you must send your students to visit India. It is an important time for them to come. It has to be seen in a different light. Thank you for giving this opportunity. I wish you all well.